Mark Wagner took another slow sip from his glass and set it back down on the worn, dark table that separated him and his two very confused sons-in-law. He shifted his gaze from one to the other. They were strongly protesting his decision to divorce their sister. It was easy to understand their anger and confusion. The brothers, Brad and Gary, had asked Mark to meet them at the small, quiet bar where they now sat. The high-backed booth afforded them privacy, but they were still talking in raised tones. Brad tried again. "Come on, Mark. You're being unfair. I know what our sister did was stupid, but you went along with it." Gary nodded in agreement. "While I would never have left my wife with a group of guys I just met, you let her. She said you let her stay with them and have a dance. I don't know why you did that, but now you can't punish her for it." Mark snorted. "I think you've been skillfully misinformed. Tell me exactly what Jill told you." Gary gestured for Brad to answer, and Brad cleared his throat. "Jill said you met some new friends you met earlier at the resort you went to last week for your anniversary. She said it was a wild bunch and you all got pretty drunk. At one point you decided to call it a night and wanted to go back to your room, but she wanted to have some more fun. You told her she could stay with them, but you had enough for one night and went to bed. Then when she tried to tell you about it, you got angry and demanded that you both leave the resort a day early. She said you barely spoke to her and the two of you flew home. Jill said she tried to get you to explain why you were so angry, but you kept saying she'd made her choice. And yesterday she was served with divorce papers at work." Gary confirmed everything Brad had said with a nod. "What the hell, Mark? You're divorcing my sister because she hooked up a little later than you wanted? That's crazy." Mark shook his head, took another sip of his bourbon, and took a deep breath. "Guys, Jill didn't lie to you, but she didn't tell you the whole story." "Okay, then tell us what she left out," Brad said. "We spent the day at the beach. Jill was attracting a lot of attention in her new tight bikini. Several guys walked past our lounge chairs to get a better look at her, and a few even stopped and tried to strike up a conversation with her. She was clearly flattered and was eager to chat with those who stopped to gawk and chat with her. A few times I had to tell them to leave, and Jill took a little offense at me for being rude to her fans. I just laughed and said I didn't want any of them to think my beautiful wife was single and suggested they find a single woman to chat to. I wasn't angry. I just wanted to spend some quiet time enjoying the beautiful beach with my wife. Jill relaxed after I said that, but I could tell she didn't like the fact that I had rained on her parade. We went back to the room and got in the shower together. The brothers grimaced. Let's just say she teased me enough to make me howl with delight, but then got out of the shower saying we had to go make dinner reservations. We each drank a bottle of wine and had a romantic dinner. I was anxious to get back to the room, but she wanted to go dancing. As you know, Jill loves to dance, so we went to the small living room adjacent to the dining area. We danced a few times and then found a table. I went to the bar to get drinks, and when I came back, there was another table pushed up to our table, and there were several young guys sitting around it and at our table. I walked over to the group and stood behind the guy who had taken my seat. Jill looked up at me, held out her hand to take her drink, and then continued her conversation with the young stud sitting in my seat. I waited about 20 seconds while they talked, then put my drink in front of him and told him loudly that he had taken my seat. They both fell silent, and he moved to the same seat. No sooner had I sat down than Jill moved to my chair, patted her former chair, and moved my drink to that seat. I wasn't sure what she was doing, but I sat down, and she reached out to stroke the inside of my thigh. I looked at her hand, then turned to speak to her, but all I could see was the back of her head. She leaned over to talk to the guy who was sitting in my chair. She was totally into this guy and just used her right hand to distract me. It worked for a few moments, but then I got angry and yanked her hand away. That got her attention, and she turned to face me. She quickly realized I was angry. Jill started introducing me to Danny, Jim, Steven, and Mark, the guys she had talked to on the beach the day before. She said that while I was gone, they saw her sitting by herself and came over to say hello. Before I could answer her, she said she had promised each of them a dance, got up, and left with the guy sitting next to her. Gary interjected. So let me understand. She invited these guys to sit with you and agreed to a dance with each of them without asking you about it? Yeah, I had no idea what was going on. I was at the bar getting drinks. I didn't want them there, and I certainly didn't want to compete with 4 strangers for my wife's attention. So what did you do? I turned to the other 3 guys and said that Jill and I were here to celebrate our 7th anniversary, and I'd appreciate it if they'd leave us alone and let us get on with our evening. Gary sighed. I take it they didn't get the hint. I shook my head. Jill came back to the table with Danny. She giggled as she sat at the table sipping her drink. Then she stood up and asked me to get her some more while she danced with Jim. I grabbed her arm and roughly pulled her back to my seat. I told her she'd had enough of dancing with these guys and we should leave. She lashed out and said she had promised each of them a dance and wasn't going to leave. I reminded her that we were here to celebrate our anniversary and my job of delivering drinks while she danced with strangers was not my idea of a celebration. Jill stood up and said I shouldn't worry, because she was sure one of the guys would bring her drinks. She said she was just having fun, and I was being a jerk because I didn't get what I wanted in the shower. At that, 4 young guys started laughing at me and commenting that I must not be able to show Jill a good time. Oh, shit, Brad said as Gary shook his head. I'd had enough at that point. I stood up and got in Jill's face. I told her I'd had enough shit for one night and I was leaving. I told her she could come with me and try to salvage the rest of our holiday, or she could stay and party with her new friends. I shoved my purse in her hands and walked away from the table. I stopped and looked right at her, but she didn't budge. I could tell that Jill was really mad at me, but there was no way I expected her to do what she did next. She threw her purse back on the table and said she was going to finish her dance. She brushed me off by saying she had her own room key, so I didn't need to wait for her. Holy shit, Brad said. Okay, sure, that's disrespectful, but is that really a deal breaker? I mean, I get why you're pissed, but she just danced with a couple guys and then went back to the room. Did she apologize when she came in? If she had, maybe we wouldn't have had such a big fight, but that's not what happened. The brothers looked at each other and sank into their chairs. What happened? As you can imagine, I was very angry when I got back to the room. It was almost 11:00. I wandered around the room for a bit, waiting for her to show up. I looked in the mini-bar and had a couple beers. By the time I finished the second beer, it was almost midnight, and I knew the lounge closed at midnight. I decided to take a shower and try to cool off. At 12:45, she still hadn't come back, so I put on my shorts and went down to the lounge. There was an overhead light on, and they were cleaning up. I asked the bartender if she saw my wife leave the bar. It took $50 to refresh her memory, but she told me what happened after I left. According to her, 2 guys left and Jill stayed with 2 others, dancing and drinking until closing time. One of the guys bought 2 bottles of wine and Jill left with them. I asked her if Jill was okay, and she said Jill was laughing and hanging on the guys, but left on her own feet. It cost me another $20 to get the room number of the room the wine was charged to. I knocked on the door of the room the barmaid gave me. A shirtless guy was laughing about something as he opened the door. I squeezed past him into the room. Jill was lying on the couch, making out with Danny. She was dressed, but Danny had his hand down her top. The shirtless guy shouted a warning, and Jill and Danny quickly separated. I wanted to punch the little asshole in the face, but he climbed over the back of the couch and ran into the bathroom. Jill jumped up and rushed at me. I grabbed her by the scruff of the neck and she fell on her ass. I turned around and walked out. Jesus Christ, exclaimed Brad. She sure as hell didn't tell us anything about it. She said she tried to assure you that nothing happened, and you pushed her away. She didn't mention that she was in the other guy's hotel room. Yeah, she's been doing that a lot lately, telling half-truths. A few months ago, I thought maybe she was hanging around with some guy at her job, but I had no proof. She denied it, of course, but there had been tension between us for weeks. I thought a trip to the beach for our wedding anniversary would allow us to repair our relationship, but she took advantage of it to hang out with other guys. Brad and Gary stood up. I'm sorry, Mark. From the way she told it, we thought you were just overreacting, but it looks like our sister screwed up big time. Mark nodded. Guys, ask her about what I said and demand an honest answer from her. I'm sure I can track down the bartender if necessary, but I saw Jill on that couch with Danny with my own eyes. I'm sure if I had waited another 20 minutes, I would have seen something much worse. The brothers stood up and shook my hand grimly. Gary patted my shoulder. Sorry, kid. We should have known you wouldn't do what she accused you of. We'll work it out with our folks. A few days later, my lawyer called and said Jill had agreed to my terms. We would split all of our money 50-50, she would take a little over half of the furniture, and we would keep our cars and retirement accounts. She insisted that we meet one last time before she signed the papers, and I reluctantly agreed. When I arrived, she was already at the attorney's office. He told me that she was in the conference room waiting for me. When I entered the room, she stood up and moved toward me, intending to give me a hug. I walked around the table and sat down. Jill looked offended, but returned to her seat. Okay, Jill, you asked for this meeting yourself. What do you want to say? Mark, I'm sorry for the way I acted. I was mad at you, and instead of talking things out with you, I tried to make you jealous by flirting with those guys. They were young and exuberant and made me feel like a queen. The flattery turned my head, and I decided I needed to get revenge for what you did. I stared at her. What the hell are you talking about? What the hell did I do? Come on, Mark. I saw you at the Hilton. Jane and I both saw you hugging a young black girl. You were right in front of the elevator, so Jane and I knew you were upstairs with her, you bastard. How could you do that to me and then come home like nothing happened? It took me a few moments to piece it all together. About 4 months ago? You saw me with a tall, beautiful African-American woman about 23 or 24 years old? Yes, she hugged you and kissed you on the cheek. She must have been very pleased with what you paid her. Paid her? Mark's face darkened with anger. You thought she was a prostitute. Spiked heels, sexy short outfit, huge breasts. And she was all over you, and you were smiling while hugging her. It was disgusting. So, you caught me with a prostitute and didn't say anything about it? I was going to barge in there and confront you, but Janie stopped me. She said all men are pigs and I should get my revenge before I confronted you. Janie? Your thrice-divorced friend from work, the same Janie? The girl who, after getting to know me for 30 minutes, told me I wasn't good enough for you, that Janie. Unlike you, she thinks I'm something special. Look, Mark, I don't want to fight. We both made a mistake. Can't we put it behind us and stop this stupid divorce? I forgive you for what you did. Can't you forgive me? You forgive me? Yes, of course I do. I was wicked and acted that way. It was wrong. I ought not to have acted as I did. I should have talked to you. I love you, Mark. I want you to come back. So we're even then? You slept with those two guys and now we're even? Asked Mark carelessly. She grinned. Actually, you showed up too early for me to do much with Danny, and I didn't sleep with Stephen. But none of that matters now. It matters to me, Mark said softly. Jill tilted her head and looked at him puzzled. Why? You cheated, I cheated. Now we're even, just like you said. No, I just asked if you believed it. You admitted you did one guy and planned to sleep with another, but I interrupted your plans. Yeah, so? You screwed that black slut, so we're even. No, I didn't, and no, I didn't, and no, she didn't, and no, we didn't. What the hell does that mean? Do you remember my PA, Marianne? Don't tell me you slept with her, too. No. That Friday you saw me at the Hilton, I had just dropped Marianne off. She stepped into the elevator, and a second later another elevator opened, and Bree stepped out of it. She came down from her suite to greet Marianne. Bree was shocked to see me, but I explained that Marianne's car had stalled, and I was taking her to the Hilton. Bree hugged me and kissed me because she was so grateful that I had brought Marianne to her big surprise. You see, Bree ordered lunch delivered to the room, and during lunch, she planned to propose to Mary Ann. Propose? Yes, she and Mary Ann have been dating for 3 years. But I thought, yeah, you listened to that slut Janie when you both drew the wrong conclusion. So you've never... Didn't cheat? No, but you cheated and... I picked up the phone. Now I have your recorded confession, so sign the damn papers. I turned and walked out. As I closed the door, I heard her wailing. I nodded to the lawyers as they headed into the conference room. Although she nearly had a breakdown in the conference room, the lawyers managed to get all the papers signed and filed. 3 months later, I was divorced. Jill still calls me to this day and begs me to give her another chance. I still have a vivid image in front of me of her rubbing up against some guy to strengthen my resolve to stay away from her. Bree and Mary Ann invited me over for dinner this weekend. Mary Ann tells me that Bree's older sister, Grace, will be there too. She claims Grace is the older version of Bree. High praise. Wish me the best of luck.